So let's answer some questions. Hello there, this is Sam. I thought I would answer some of your questions that you have sent to me. Thank you very much for doing that. I did realize a lot of these questions are probably good videos as well, but they're, I need to create those videos first. So until then, I hope I can help you some or start, get a way to start thinking about this, but giving you some answers. So I have, oops. I have my tea here and my questions, and let's see what we can do. So the first question here is a question I wanted to ask you. After watching the video How to EQ an Orchestra, do you have any suggestions for a correct and functional methodological approach? What should you pay attention to? What are the mistakes to avoid? Well, that is a good question and a long one and a video. What can I say now? I actually really think that How to EQ an Orchestra plus the video on what instruments you should use, or what instruments to use in an orchestra rather, it seems simple, but there's a lot of answers there. There really are. Look at those again, or maybe you get what I'm talking about, and really follow that. Because personally, I don't do a lot of EQing. It is true that when I compose, I kind of fix the sound as I go. Not too much, though. That's dangerous, but a little bit. So my EQing after the piece is done is quite minimal. I use some nice tools, some plugins to just touch up some things. But in general, I would say the bottom end is the most difficult one. And if you have written a piece that is just too muddy, it's hard. It's very hard without a lot of experience to take care of. So I would actually say, if there's a lot of problems in your mix, then look at your arrangement, because that is more important. Yeah, so otherwise, bottom end is where the problems are. Low mid, also, it can be a lot of mud. And that's what I look for in general. So, yeah, I don't know much more to say. I really think it's down to the arrangement. Well, I could say that one thing that is really, really helpful is to compare to the other mixes. So you can compare to what you're trying to sound like. That is an excellent advice. Also get other people's ideas, their opinions, have them play and say, play the song for them and say, what do you like? What do you think? Is there anything standing out? That's really good to get another pair of ears. Another way, if you can, is to play your music in different places. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but you can play in the car or different, worse iPhone headphones. I mean, or different speakers. Then you will also hear more clearly. Because otherwise, the big boring answer is that to really hear all the problems that your mix might have, you need equipment, and it's expensive. You need a very good room and good speakers, and it's just, yeah, it's very difficult for most people to really do. So instead, a really good pair of headphones. And some people, and I'm one of them, really enjoy these waves that's made. A lot of people make them now. It's a plugin that's puts you in a virtual space. And I know a lot of people hate these plugins. They really like, oh, it's the worst. But seriously, I've improved my mixes incredibly since using those. I'm not advocating any of them. I think they all work. What they basically do is that they put your ears in a different environment. And you should treat that as having, being in a car or having in a different room, and that's what it is. So you get a bigger perspective. It's not that it fixes your mix for you. It just gives you another perspective, and that has really helped me. There are quite a lot of those plugins out there, so that could be a good advice. But then you also need some fairly good headphones as well. So a long answer there, but I would invest in good headphones because that you will hear a lot of the problems. So I will think about how I can create a nice video that will show a little bit how I work with the EQ and take care of the problems. Okay, next question. So I also have East and West, but I have a very difficult time getting expression and dynamics out of them. Besides changing texture, would you show how to make them dynamically more responsive? I think I know what the problem is here, because e- let's say the Contact by Native Instrument, I think they pretty much set a standard for how to use the faders. And most libraries follow that idea. And that is that CC1, the mod wheel on your keyboard, is usually the one that controls the dynamic layers. And most people confuse dynamic layers with volume because obviously, yes, the volume goes higher and lower, but really what you're changing is how the instrument sounds. So that's what most people do, most libraries do, I mean. And then CC11, which is called expression, is usually the sort of the volume knob. But that's the volume knob for the instrument. There is also CC7, which in Contact is actually the volume, the real volume. So it's a little bit different, but I would say CC1 mod wheel usually and CC11 expression are the two ones to keep track of. And that's why you kind of need two faders. So East and West, they do that a little bit differently. They have vibrato control and they put that on the mod wheel, but only in those patches that has a 12 in it. That means you have 12 dynamic layers and vibrato control is included. So the mod wheel or CC1 will then just change into vibrato and no vibrato. And I think there are only 3 layers, most of them. I could be incorrect there. So if you don't pay attention to that, you might just pull that thing up and down and you notice, oh, there's no volume change. It feels a little bit different. Yeah, that's vibrato. And it's not super obvious, but it is, try it again. And then expression, you need an expression fader. That would be your volume. You need to control CC11. The problem with orchestra, the Hollywood orchestra, is that, unless I'm mistaken, there's no way of changing the CC MIDI CC in the actual play. You have to do that on your hardware controller yourself, which I have. So I have a dedicated one. You could also control it in Cubase. I know I'm sure you can do that in other ways. You can, set up a virtual fader in your DAW that controls CC11. Kind of a pain, but then you can draw that in later if you want to change. So think of that. Those two, that the dynamic layer CC1, the mod wheel, often controls vibrato, unless the dynamic layer is less than 12 in East-West. Okay, I hope that answered the question. I'll see if I make a video about that as well. How to use the various mics provided in an instrument set. Well, I talked about it also a little bit in the video, but very generally, most better libraries have a set of, close. You can say close, mid, and far. They're definitely more than that. It's all kind of ribbon mics and different positions and room mics and all kinds of stuff. But think it like that. Is the mic close or is it further away? And that's really what this is about. It does change the reverb somewhat because you get more of a room sound when you're further back, obviously, and less when you're closer. So I would say in the beginning, when you're just learning how to orchestrate, I wouldn't bother so much about the mic positions, but otherwise, intimate sound is close mic and bigger sound is further back. Now, I probably won't show that very well with this mic. I'm just trying to show you that if you want that big, enormous, vast, 2,000 players kind of sound, then you want a big room because then the room is enhancing that sound. The reverb effect is big. If you want a more intimate sound, like it's a smaller orchestra, you want the closer mics to it. That's the easy answer. Different libraries provide different mics. East and West has an okay one, but there is not that enormous difference between the mics, I would say. Otherwise, just play and see what combination works because there's no straight answer because libraries are different, different rooms. So a combination of some mics in one library just doesn't sound the same as in another library, unfortunately. When you compose, do you compose directly in a DAW or do you write music on a sheet? And on that note, what is your favorite way of composing or your process? Wow. Let's see. I compose mostly in the DAW and before that, I composed a little bit on paper, but I haven't been a massive pen and paper kind of guy. Before I had a DAW, I used most things on a piano. Some people, I understand the benefits of writing, which I won't go into now, but I like to hear everything. See, I was that kind of guy. I had an idea in my mind and I wanted to hear it instantly, so I always played on the piano, and the piano is a great way to compose. And if you don't have a DAW, piano is the best, I think. You have all the notes the right there, and you can try chords and melodies, and it's just the best way. But I compose really by listening to myself. What I mean, well, a lot of people have this gear and they sit down and they try to compose something, but then the libraries themselves are dictating how you should sound. Often, it's like, and that can be very difficult. It can be frustrating to say, I'm not getting anything interesting by just pressing the keys. So try to listen to your head. Be silent and what do you hear in your head, and sing your melodies. I've said that before. That's my favorite way. If I try to recreate what I hear in my radio here. And if you don't have a radio in here, you do. But if you feel like you don't have access to it, then you need to have more time to hear yourself. And that can be by taking walks alone, driving alone, spending time with yourself alone, meditate, stuff like that. I'm not saying you should become a loner, but there should be that time for you, not just, getting stuff in your head all the time. Also, listen a lot to music. Just listen to a lot of music, everything, often, and enjoy it. Take time to do that, because then you get inspiration, obviously. So I don't know if that answered my favorite way. I really like to go in and have fun with my DAW, but if I don't have an initial idea in my radio, then it feels kind of fruitless for me. Yeah. Okay. What is a decent computer setup for creating music? Laptop or a desktop, and hardware? It's a big question. I wouldn't say I'm the biggest expert on this, but of course I've done this for quite a while and I've tried different things. A laptop can be nice in a way that it's portable, but I have personally never really found a benefit to that. You can sit outside or take your laptop in the forest if you have a nice car or something. No, it's never worked for me. A desktop is what you need, I think, because you can change components and it lasts longer. It's easier to upgrade. It makes less noise. A laptop is very expensive. All the parts are smaller. It just costs much more, and it usually makes a lot of noise. It has a great fan that is just direct, close to you, and it's harder to place monitors and all that. So a desktop is the way to go. And now my computer is starting to get old, but I mean, perfectly fine for me. But it has an i5, which is totally okay. You don't need the latest i9s and all, or similar the Ryzen's and all that. They're great, but unless you're super gamer, you don't need those. The CPUs today are incredibly fast. So i5 and up, works fine. You don't have to spend that much money. What you do need are good SSD drives. And I made one mistake. I thought I needed huge. So I put in as a terabyte of, which is not the biggest, but a terabyte SSD as my sort of, what do you call it, core drive. That's not necessary because you don't want your libraries to be on the same drive as your sort of computer, where Windows or Mac, whatever it is you're using. You don't want that there. You want it on a separate drive. So there was no point in getting that big drive. You can get a smaller SSD drive, quite a small one, just that fits, your files and basically your operating system. Then you get other SSD drives, fast ones. Now then you can get 1 or 2 terabytes for hardly anything. I mean, you need almost a terabyte for the Hollywood Orchestra itself. I think it's close to that if you have the full diamond version. So I would try to slowly get up there to 2, 3, 4 terabytes. 2 is great. You will be fine, and maybe even 1. It depends on how much libraries you have, obviously. Hard drive, yes, you can definitely do it with 16 gigabytes of RAM today. You can have all the orchestra, libraries at the same time, but you can definitely do that. So if money is a problem, 16 is fine. 32 is totally fine. 64, then you kind of future-proof. I mean, I know there are people going more than that. I have never had a problem with that, and I use quite big templates. I have those templates that takes like 10, 50 minutes to load, and it's totally workable. One thing to look out for, just look at your motherboard. What can it do? Because they change all the time. Can it do as much RAM as you want? Just check out the compatibility issues. But most producers now are or producers, manufacturers rather, they're quite kind in telling you what works. I forgot what it's called, but there are lots of forums you can check out. So a decent CPU, you don't need a good GPU unless you're a gamer, obviously, but you don't need it. It's just a waste of time. Most CPUs today are good enough to, I think an i5 can handle to render The Witcher, the game Witcher 3. So, they're good enough. You don't need a fast graphic card, not for running Cubase or anything like that. Yes, a lot of RAM, 16, I would say the minimum. Try to go to 32 at least. You need a terabyte of SSD not to run your system on. It needs to be a silent computer. Doesn't make a lot of noise. Get at least one hardware unit to control your faders. It can be really cheap. If you can see the one I have here. I have other ones, but that one, Korg Nano, or if you can see it, it's excellent. It's not the best, but it really, if you want something cheap, it works really well. Yeah. I hope that answers it. You have to answer more out of us. Ask more. What would be, in your opinion, the most efficient way to learn in a faster manner writing for orchestra in a DAW? What should be the steps, in what order? Yeah, that's all course, isn't it? I might be coming. Well, try to give you some answers here. Listening. It's a boring answer, but it really is. Listen and compare. And then have a daily practice. Also boring answer, but it's true. Set a time every day. As I said in the video, become a more productive computer. Can't speak today. Become a more productive I want to say computer. Hi there, this is Sam. Become a more productive composer. Those tips might seem like they're, not related, but really they do, because if you have a healthy and sound mind, you will come up with more ideas. But otherwise, more practically, it's really listen to music daily. Listen to specific music you're trying to create. So don't just, the top 10 lists. If you want to create some orchestral music, then you need to go listen to orchestral music. Okay, find something. Oh, I like that. Try to recreate it. The whole piece might be a little bit daunting. So just, the first 2 minutes, try to recreate that. You will really learn. Otherwise, another technique is to really work with sections. Just work on the string sections, What can I do with string sections? Can I complete whole songs with a string section, or just the brass, or whatever? Use individual sections in the orchestra. And then you can, when you feel better at that, you can then combine those, to create textures. But yes, I would say that. Take sections, create a few pieces, and then maybe add 2 sections, and then 3 and 4 and all that. Yeah, that's a good approach. Limitations otherwise, okay, I'm going to try to record a song, or create a song rather, with French horn and harp. I don't know, just fun, because you will learn your instrument, and you will learn just not the real instrument, you will learn that too, but also your digital instrument. Okay. How to overcome writer's block? Well, I would say the video, become a more productive producer, which I can't say today. Become a more productive composer. It's really answering that quite well. Personally, just to set a time and stick to it has really helped me. And also to set a time where nobody bothers me. Yeah, turn off the phone. Get off social media. Jesus Christ. That is just a waste of talent. Social media can be great, but it really drains your energy. Maybe put a blocker on your phone, because you have to force yourself. Yeah. Obviously there's creative flow and all that, and it should be fun, right? But you have to force yourself. That's part of it, to create a discipline, When you start practicing working out your body, it's a pain the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks sometimes. Then it starts to become fun. So, I've tried so many things in my life, different ways, that I could talk about. It's going to be a long video. Maybe I'll create that. I've even had a bunch of apps that block my computer from all kinds of things. But set challenges to yourself. Like, I have to create this thing for my friend on Friday, or else. Use competitions. It doesn't matter if you win. Use them. That will create. It's like, oh, I have to create this song. competitions are a great way. Maybe in YouTube, just I have a challenge to myself, and I create this song, and I'm gonna post it on YouTube next week. Those are good pushers as well. Yep. How to make a catchy and memorable melody. Yeah, there are tons of videos on that on YouTube. That's also something I could do. Trust your inner radio again. Really. Listen to music and sing your melodies, and don't try to force out music on your instrument or your digital instrument. Listen here, recreate that, copy what other people do, and listen to music. It's just that, and have a daily routine. Because when you flex your muscles, they start to become bigger and stronger. When you flex your melody brain by trying a little bit every day, they will become better. And catchy and all that. Well, if you want to follow the pop music and all that style, then, there's quite a lot of formulas for doing that. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying there's a lot of material out there. How to make chord progressions that sound like a film score. Oh, what kind of film score? I don't know what you mean. The best way there is to listen to the film score you're interested in and try to recreate it. I know there are a lot of, catchy film scores that follow the 4-chord formula, which is sort of more popular within pop music. And that's totally fine. But, if you want something more interesting in that, this requires some music theory, and maybe I'll make a video of that. But it's basically to use more chromatic chords and to use more relative chords. If that's new to you, I have to make a video, but not just following the chords within the diatonic scale, but also to try other ones outside. It's not that difficult, but it requires a little bit of musical knowledge. So listen to music, recreate what they're doing, and start to experiment with other chords outside the diatonic scale. How to use the different instruments, for example, the string family in terms of voicing chords to get different texture. Well, I kind of talked about that in the video, what instrument to use in an orchestra, and that might not be my most popular video because it's boring, right? Yeah, it's easy, right? It's just looking at the instrument family, the size, and what they're made of, and that will tell you what to use at the top. Now, there are no rules, but there are some good ideas. Smaller instruments go higher up in the chord, and bigger instruments go lower down in the chord. And that's really one of the best indications. In terms of getting different textures, I think that's a different question. Yeah, if I want to write the melody line in a cello, how do I make it stand out? Well, let's take the texture first. Well, as I've mentioned before, some instruments have larger registers, so you can try to play outside of the register a little bit. It doesn't always sound so good. Like it's not comfortable if you think of a real player to play too low and too high, to play too low or too high, but it definitely creates a different texture. Like you can maybe the cello can play a bit higher than it normally does. Or, for example, viola to play much higher than it normally does. That's the way to create different textures. So look at the size of the instruments and what they're made of and place them according to that. And then try to see, well, what happens if I take this instrument that normally is here and just push a little bit higher or a little bit lower? That could be a fun way to do that. And then obviously, if you look at different families, if you look at the string family, then you take the wind family, then sort of what instrument matches the violin, in range, more or less, and then, interchange those or use the same instrument at the same time. The next question, if I want to write the melody line on the cello, how do I make it stand out so to avoid the violin's overshining? How to make this track sound warm and full without making it muddy? Well, there's a lot to say to that, but then you really have to, the video I had on how to EQ your orchestra or how to learn from the orchestra is that if you have a bunch of violins up there and you don't hear the cello, it's because they're too loud. It's just that. And you can't just reduce your volume. They have to play in a different way. or you have a bunch of cellos and one violin, you know. So you have to look at that. You can't just overpower the higher instruments. They have to play softer or not playing, or maybe use winds instead. Cello is pretty powerful, but if you don't hear it, it's because other instruments are too loud. In terms of, and that's how easy it is, or difficult. Obviously, this is not an easy task, but that's where you have to look. You know, where are the volumes and what are they playing? If the violins are playing forte fortissimo and they're all of them playing, yeah, the cello's going to struggle. Or if it's going to be the solo instrument, obviously. If you want it to be more clear, then the violins and violas cannot play close to the cello range. They have to be much higher up. Because if you have this higher sizzling sound up here, then it doesn't compete with the lower register of the cello. So you have to look at it that way. They're not close to each other. They're really playing different registers. And that's the way. And then obviously the cello cannot compete with a lot of basses or trombones or percussion. I mean, it can, but you have to make sure that they don't fight for the frequencies. You know, you have to look at it at a whole room or a spectrum of frequencies. You know, the instrument that needs to be heard cannot compete with that instrument. In order to not make it muddy, well, if the cello is by itself, and it's not a problem, it's not going to sound muddy. But if it competes with that instrument, yes, it will be muddy unless they play the same melody or the voicing. Lower voicings has to be much wider apart, like thirds and seconds. It just doesn't really work down in the lower register. We're talking more fourths and fifths and sixths. That's kind of spread apart voicing down there. I have to do a video on this, I feel, but I'm just trying to give you some answers here. Yes, if you want, cello can be the bass and it can play the melody. You can have you can divide the cello section to do that, but then they cannot be too close, obviously. Otherwise, don't play the bass in the cello. Let the basses play the bass instead, and they can go an octave lower than the cello. So that's another way. Okay, that's some answers today. I didn't even drink my tea. My broken pad. So I hope that satisfied some of your questions. Feel free to ask me more. Maybe I'll make another video of this in the future. You can do that here or on my social media outlets, anywhere. So it was nice doing this. Hope to see you soon and have a great day. Take care.